God called Abram, he was a wealthy man. No son, but he was a wealthy man in Ur of the Chaldees. I'm going to read this to you. I know it's going to put me over time, but this poem, I love this poem. Imagine Abraham. His whole family's lived in this very wealthy Babylon and all. They had these big, huge temples to their gods. And he had 318 men working for him. He had flocks of camels and sheep and goats and donkeys. He was a wealthy man. And all of a sudden, at 75 years old, this voice comes out of nowhere and says, pack up and leave. I love this poem. Take me 2 minutes to read it, called The Call of Abraham. Think of this guy being a simple guy like us. He had his own business. He was there, the tombs of his ancestors. He knew everybody. This was his home. Just an average guy. Talk about imperious without a may I presume. He's talking to God now. No previous contact with you. No letter of introduction, this unknown God. He issues edicts. This is not a conversation. Am I a nobody to receive decrees from someone whose name I do not even know? I have worshipped my own God. To you I have addressed no prayers, but quick, like sudden fire in the desert, I hear from you, go. At 75, am I supposed to scuttle my life? Take that ancient wasteland named Sarah? Place my arthritic bones upon the road to some mumbled nowhere? Let me get this straight. I will be brief. I summarize. In 10 generations since the flood, you have spoken to no one. Now, like thunder on a clear day, you give commands. Pull up my tent. Desert the graves of my ancestors. Leave Haran and Ur where I live for a country you do not even name, there to be a stranger. God of the wilderness, from 2 desiccated lumps, from 2 parched prunes, Sarah and Abraham, you will promise all of the people of the earth will be blessed from us 2 parched prunes. You come late, Lord. You come very late. But my camels will leave in the morning. I don't know how many times I've read that. I still get a tear. The hair goes up on the back of my neck and I get a tear in my eye. But my camels leave in the morning. Is God going to call you to do something crazy? I remember the day I woke up in the year 2000 and I knew I had to make a documentary video films. I got them out there. I have one more to go. It's been a 20-year project and I have one more to do. The doctors of the church who've done Abraham, Moses, David and Solomon, Elijah and Elisha, Mary, Jesus, Paul, Peter, and Apostolic Fathers. We have one more to do and I'll have my 10 series done. It'll be a 20-year project. I woke up in the middle of the night. I had never thought of this before, but I knew what I had to do. And I grabbed my wife at 2 o'clock in the morning, sound asleep. Jenna, quick, wake up. We have to do a 10-part video series on the history of salvation from a Catholic perspective. You woke me up, scared me half to death to tell me that you're crazy. Go back to sleep. We can't even take good pictures. How does God expect us to make movies? And it was all in my head. I could have said, wait a minute, where am I going to get the money for this? I don't know how to take pictures. I've never had a degree or don't even know anything about taking videos. How am I going to do all of this? And I could have rolled over and gone to sleep. But the reason I like that poem about Abraham is because it's kind of like, well, I'll go buy a video camera in the morning. There's times God's going to call you to step out and do things. Just the average you and me and Abraham and Sarah, the desiccated prunes they called, withered up prunes. When he says your wife's going to, he's 75, she's 65. And God says you're going to have a son. And I want you to move to this land. If it had been me or you, here's what we would have said. We're going to have a son, huh? Have you taken a look at Sarah lately? And if you're going to take me to those places, I want to know about my pension. I want to know if I would like to see the signature on the deed to the land now with the area that it's going to cover. I want to know if we're going to have health insurance and retirement. And what do you mean we have to ride camels all the way? That's 1,600 miles. That's why he's called the father of faith, but he's nothing special, a toothless guy that smells like goats. And yet he obeyed God and he said, I will follow you. I'll do what you say. That's why. Oh, and then just lastly, I shouldn't do this but for time, but he's now about 100 and he's now 99, and God finally comes after 25 years of walking in that desert without owning 1 inch of land, and he still doesn't have a son, and now Sarah is 89 years old. And God comes and says, Sarah's going to have a son next year. Really? And he says to Abram, and I'm going to give you a sign of the covenant now. I've tested you for these years and you proved faithful. Now I'm going to give you a sign of the covenant. And Abraham thinks, oh, this is great. I'm finally going to get something worthwhile out of this deal. God hands him a flint knife and says, cut it off. Circumcise yourself. At 100 years old. I did this talk for a bunch of kids about, I said that God told him to cut it off, and the boy said, the whole thing? I'm kind of earthy. I'm not your average Catholic speaker. Okay. But there again, when you read that passage, can you imagine Abram calling his guys around the fire that night for dinner and saying, I have good news and I have bad news. What would you like to hear first? And just like where it says, my camels will leave in the morning, that passage said, and the flint knives flashed the next morning. And they were all circumcised. That is obedience. Abraham saved by faith alone? Not on your life. He was saved because of faith and his obedience to God. And now he's 115. He's got this handsome young boy named Isaac. And God says, Genesis 22, take your son, your only son, whom you love, and offer him at Mount Moriah as a as a sacrifice. I'd have said, that does it. 35 years out here in the wilderness, I've done everything you said. You gave me the son. I still don't own the land. I still haven't seen the pension or the health insurance. Now you tell me I've got to kill my son. Now in my movie on Abraham, I talk about why God would do that. That's not as strange as you might think it is in the context, the historical context. But it doesn't say Abraham left and went back to Ur of the Chaldees. It said he loaded up the fire and the wood, and he took his son. Do you know why he had to take his son to Mount Moriah? 3 days walk to Mount Moriah. Can you imagine 3 days knowing you're going to have to kill your son at the other end of it? I don't think Abraham knew that. He knew he wasn't going to have to do it. There's 3 indicators in the Bible that he knew something was going to happen to keep that from happening. But the reason that he had to go to Mount Moriah is because Solomon built his temple later on Mount Moriah, 1,000 years later. Solomon built his temple on Mount Moriah, and 2,000 years later, this only son, the only begotten son of a father whom he loved, was sacrificed at the same place on Mount Moriah. Do you know that? He was giving you a picture. God was giving you a human picture of a father with an only begotten son whom he loved. 2,000 years before it happened, so that when it happened, you'd go back and remember Abraham. And it was all told to you ahead of time. In fact, when Isaac walked up Mount Moriah, it said he had the wood for the fire, the wood of the sacrifice on his back. What did the new Isaac Jesus have on his back when he went up? The wood of the sacrifice. And when they went to the top and they're going to have to kill Isaac, the angel said, stop, and they found a ram with his head stuck in a thorn bush. What was Jesus' head stuck in when he went up to the top and was crucified? Crown of thorns. This is just an average guy, Abraham. The way I like to see Abraham is a man who just clings to God, and I'm not going to let you go. You said you were going to do these things, I'm holding you to it. You made me promises, keep them. I don't understand everything, but I'm going to hold on to you and just see if you can get away from me. I'm going to hang on to you. And that's the sainthood of Abraham. He obeyed. He trusted God. He was an average guy, but he trusted and loved God. And he clung to God, and he wouldn't let him go. You want to be a saint? Do that. Hold him to his promises. Cling to him. Obey him. Have faith in him, and don't let him go.